And yes, so welcome back. And as I promised, we're going to confuse you with life cycle assessment, and you're going to help me with all that, right? No. It'll become clear why we're talking about life cycle assessment and eco-efficiency soon. Oh, it died. Okay, no, it didn't die. So life cycle assessment is based on a few principles. The most important principles are the laws of thermodynamics, and they state that first law, nothing disappears. So everything gets transformed into something else. So if you think about, for example, petrol, you burn petrol, it doesn't go away. It gets transformed into something else. So that's the law of conservation of mass. It doesn't really disappear, it gets transformed into something else, usually something of lesser quality. The law of conservation of energy says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can be transformed, but it cannot be created or destroyed. The same with mass. You can transform mass into energy, but then you're talking about Einstein and a lot of those E equals mc squared, and so better not go into that. Okay. The second law of thermodynamics is everything spreads out. Energy moves from a concentrated to a more dispersed form, and the same with mass. So if you, for example, if you take a gold ring, let's say 10 grams of gold ring, and you have it there, you're like, oh, yeah, beautiful, right? It's there. But where does it come from? It comes from moving about 1 ton, no, 10 grams, about 2 to 3 tons of soil to get those 10 grams of gold. Because gold is all spread out. And then if you look at it, for example, you have rice, white rice, and you put some grains of black rice, you have them separated and it's fine. But if you put them together and you mix them, it becomes a mess, and then you need to separate them. That's the loss of conservation of mass, just to make them very, very simple. Why life cycle assessment? The traditional focus is on the product. So you have the energy over there. So you have your product manufacture, and you have your product use or consumption. And then you have waste on both sides, you have energy here. And that's when production tends to focus on. So you have your production, your product, forget about it. You know, as the Italians, the Italian Americans would say, forget about it. In life cycle assessment, what you want to do is you look at the entire life cycle of the product or a service, right? You look from the raw material acquisition to the materials manufactured, to the product manufactured, to the product use or consumption, to disposal, landfill, incineration, and recycle. And then you have, for example, key reuse, recycle, and ecological loop. So you look way beyond the downstream and upstream, as they call it in life cycle. So you're not only looking at one part, you're looking at the entire system. And that you tend to do in one snapshot of time. And then we should be looking at it throughout time. Okay. This is another way to look at it. So we have the natural resources, we have the extraction of the raw materials, and then we have design and production, have packaging, you have use, disposal, incineration, recovery, if you have any recycling materials, reuse, etc., etc. So you have to think of the entire thing. Not just, I have my product, I discard my product, and that's it. Where do products come from? And at the moment, products come from all over the world. Okay. A little bit of history. We have the first life cycle assessments back in the 1960s and 1970s, and they were done by packaging companies and beverage companies because they wanted to demonstrate that they were better than anybody else. Okay, it was not really an academic exercise, it was more of an academic exercise. Okay. They were used to evaluate alternatives from the point of view, for example, energy consumption or waste management, and they were done by companies who were frequently related to defend themselves against environmental requirements. It's not because I'm so environmentally good, it's because the government comes and tells me you have to do it, and I say, hold your horses. My product is so good because I'm looking at the entire life cycle. And there you have competing LCAs that were used in environmental combats between different materials and packaging options. So it doesn't come from good, it just comes from evil. But now we transform it into good. That sounds like a Star Wars, right? It's usually presented as a very objective way of assessing things, not measuring, but assessing. So we assess where the products come from. So you take into consideration this little nice machine. You have different types of products. So you have stainless steels, you have some rare materials from China, you have some plastics probably coming from, I don't know, Middle East from oil, you have some aluminum, and you have some other things, and then you have to start separating into all of those things. Where do they come from? How much energy did you use to produce those ones? How much material did you use to produce those ones? And of course, it's not as simple as that. Okay, I should have. No. Sorry, zoom and. Yeah.
The site is not changing, so but I don't
okay.
know why.
It's no idea. As I said before, it's based on the laws of conservation of mass, conservation of energy, and those things. So I know many of you are lawyers, but I'm trying to make this kind of simplistic, and that's why I put the laws of conservation. So there's a law there. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at the entire life cycle of that product or service, of the product service combination. There are two ways that you can consider this to be rational. A true representation of human nature interactions. So when you buy or manufacture a product, it actually causes the environmental burdens depicted in the LCA. And then you have the instrumental type of LCA that you use it for managing when you have when you're in a company. So there are two ways of looking into an LCA. You use it as a technique. So we have LCA that's used as a technique, and then we'll see two other not competing but complementary concepts. And you compile an inventory of all the different materials and all this different energy that is used in each stage of that life cycle. And there are different softwares, right? You are quite familiar with the software. You put in the software, the quantities, and then it tells you where does it come from. Indonesia, it comes from China, it comes from Germany, and it tells you some calculations on that. You evaluate the potential impacts of those products and services, the materials and the services, and then you interpret those results. So it's not fully rational because you still have to do some interpretation of those results and say, well, it's interpretation of a cobalt that comes from Afghanistan. What's the impact in Afghanistan at the moment? Environmental impact. Okay, life cycle is only about environmental. There's a new trend calling it social life cycle assessment, but the traditional one is only environmental. And then you compare your products or your functions. And that's important because in life cycle assessment, what you want to compare is a function. So let's compare my little PET bottle, this PET, against your plastic cup. Which one is that? Environmentally significant. I don't know. That's what we use in the LCA. So I can use this one 100 times, 300 times, but there's a lot more product here. There's a lot more energy here. And that one, I can use it maybe 3 times, but there's less product, there's less service, there's energy. Which one is better? I don't know. And that's why I need to carry out an LCA. So you use it to compare two products in that sense. But you can also use it to compare the same product. So I can use this one, and I looked into the entire life cycle. And then I look at which stage in the life cycle is the one that it has the most impact, which one has the hot spots in that sense. So you can use it in two ways. And this is the Lca framework. You have your goal and scope definition, you have your inventory analysis, you have your impact assessment, and you have your interpretation phase with identification of the issues, completeness, sensitivity check, blah, 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 recommendations, and then you have your direct applications. Very simplistically put, right? Because there's a lot of papers, there's a lot of books, there's journals, there's a lot of things on life cycle assessment. But I wanted you to kind of get an overview of what we mean by that. It has a lot of advantages. So you can promote environmental responsibility on the part of producers, which can lead to process and product innovation and more sustainable and sound product design. Cool. We can disclose that material and energy used to our consumers, and you tell them this product has so much plastic, so much aluminum, so much energy used to produce this one, etc., etc. Now, whether the consumers see it or not, that's another problem for green marketing, and that's not a problem for LCA. But both of them are discussed here on chapter 4, I think. Yeah. It can allow consumers and public interest to independently verify whether the product is really what they're claiming to do and not just mere greenwash. It allows the advocates to form new coalitions with people affected throughout the entire supply chain. And we can identify those hotspots. Told you there are two main principles for life cycle assessment. One is to compare products or services, and the other one is to detect those hotspots. That's not like a song or anything. It just is to detect those hotspots. But it has disadvantages, as everything does. It doesn't say how it is done or for what purpose. How do we do it? I put it on the software, yeah, but is it true or not? And to what purpose am I doing that? It is very complex. So if you do a full LCA, complete LCA, it's going to take you a lot of time. It's going to cost you a lot of money. If you're a company like Procter & Gamble and you have thousands and thousands of products, can you really do it for each of your products? Not really. So you take a sample and then you do some. And it is necessary to determine how the input should be weighed and reflect on the environmental risk, because you have different things. Okay, do I put this one more important? Do I put plastic more important than aluminum? Or do I make it more important than rare earths? How do I do this? So there are some disadvantages. It is time consuming, it is expensive, and it's data intensive. So if you're a lawyer, don't do it. No, I'm not kidding. Even engineers, we dread it. It's like, oh, life cycle. Can I do something else, please? Okay, it can be very cumbersome due to the data requirements and the boundary setting for the analysis, because you have to set up your boundary for your system. We're talking about systems tomorrow. Where do I start? When do I start my LCA? Do I go back to the beginning of time where the dinosaurs died and then they were pressed up by the forces of the earth and the gravity and all of that? Or do I just start when I buy the barrel of oil to make plastic? Where do I start? Where do I end? So you need to set up those boundaries. And it is mainly concerned with environmental impact. So the social part of sustainability is forgotten, and the money side is forgotten, as it is the time dimension of sustainability. Doesn't mean it's bad. It means that it's good because it allows you to look throughout the entire life cycle of a product or a service. We have some problems. So main problem of life cycle assessment is, how do I define my functional unit? So how will I compare this to that? Which functional unit do I use? This is about half a liter. That's about 250. So I put it on 250. We put it at 500. And so it becomes complicated. That's the most difficult thing on life cycle assessment. How do I define my functional units that allocate environmental burden of multi-product processes and using average or marginal emission energy emission data? These cannot be resolved using the methods of natural sciences, and therefore you need interpretation. And by interpretation, that means that you're going to have a different interpretation than me, and you're going to have a different interpretation. And that's when life cycle assessment becomes a little bit weak. Not too weak, just a little bit weak. Giving you an example, life cycle assessment of a washing machine. You have energy consumption, air pollution, water, solid waste, and water consumption. And you might imagine that the production of life cycle of a washing machine is the most polluting one. No, it's the use of that washing machine. So if it's the use, do I really need to care a lot about that or about the disposal? No, I need to care more about the use. And that's when I start to think, oh, okay, but how can I design my product to be more efficient throughout the use, or more effective, or both? Then we have a complementing one that's called life cycle management. We know that life cycle assessment is complicated, complex, expensive. Yeah.
The fact is that production, distribution, and disposal are events that happen in just one moment, while use happens across a lot of time.
A lot of time, and that's what we need, the time dimension of sustainability.
So does this change things completely because
No, not really, but that's when you have to set up your context in life cycle assessment, and that's when the time dimension becomes important. Do I do it throughout 10 years or 5 years? And that's the definitions, and I think you can talk to Hytham about the time dimension on life cycle assessments, which tends to be not really taken into consideration. Okay, so we have life cycle management, because a lot of people, and especially the non-engineers, well, like, that's a bit complicated. Can we do something about it and make it a little bit more simplistic? Okay, so we have life cycle management, which is a business management approach to life cycle that you don't have the assessment part. So you don't have that rigor on that. What you do is, okay, we're going to do something. We have to think of the entire life cycle stages. We don't need to assess it, but we need to consider that and make sure that whenever we're doing a management approach, we take into consideration life cycle of a business, an organization, in order to improve their sustainability performance, environmental performance, to be more precise. It can be used by small companies, big companies, can be used by organizations like a university or anything like that. And you can use it to target, organize, analyze, and manage product-related information and activities towards continuous improvement along the product life cycle. So here, you don't really take a magnifying glass like that one. So you kind of look at it a bit more on a bit more shallow in that sense. So you don't go into really data intensive, but you think, okay, which one is the most heavy, the stage that impacts the most environmental issues, and let's deal with that. Why do we use LCM? Well, it builds awareness internally, which is quite good. You can use it for risk analysis, or is it going to be washed in this stage or that stage or disposal stage, etc. And then you can reduce the pressure from stakeholders, and then we can talk about power at FIC. Okay, we can prevent pollution and decrease materials of concern, so rare earths, but for example, we can talk about radioactive materials. If you think about a hospital, if you're procuring things from a hospital, you need to have radioactive materials. What do we do with that? Where do we get it from? And how are we going to dispose of those ones? It saves money and increases efficiency, reduces energy, reducing the use materials and saving water. We have cost-effective mitigation of environmental impacts and supporting key choices in technology, investment, and product development. How do we integrate LCM? LCA, as if you remember, I told you it's a technique. LCM is a process. So it's not a technique now, it's a process. You have to look at it throughout. It must be integrated into routine business processes and the business strategy, management approach, not science, not technology approach, more management approach. And it is about making life cycle thinking and product sustainability operational for businesses that want continuous improvement. Okay. And it must be aligned with other efforts of sustainability. This is what 3M, the chemical company in the US, is using life cycle management. They don't go into detail of life cycle assessment, but we have the commercialization team, laboratory, marketing, manufacturing, etc. Then we have product steward. Then we have the environmental health and safety regulation, I think it is. We have the product and we have manufacturing. Yeah. This is how they use it. So 3M, they use 438 pollution principles-based, I think, projects, and they reported 51 million kilograms of pollution prevented as a reduction of 2.5 million tons of CO2. That's not from an LCA, that's from an LCM. Yeah? It's from looking at it as a management approach. It's a second arm of sustainability of 3M, or it used to be, and it's been part of the company policy, and it's been used for identifying and managing environmental health and safety and regulatory risks and opportunities, and efficiently using resources throughout their life cycle. Now, if we go a bit broader, so if we get rid of that second magnifying glass, and then we go even broader, we have what we call life cycle thinking. And if you do sustainability, you have to do life cycle thinking. So not only about economic, environmental, social, and the time dimensions and their interactions, but you also have to think, where are the stages of the product or the service? So life cycle thinking is really, really broad, and it's how you have to think about. Then you have to manage it, and then you have to really go into life cycle assessment. It is essential for sustainable consumption and production, or production and consumption, depending on how you want to put them. It goes beyond the traditional focus of just this tiny little thing. We have to look at it throughout the entire life cycle stages of a product or service or service. Yeah. Going from production sites, manufacturing processes, and afterwards. And this is the principle also of circular economy and industrial symbiosis and many other things. Okay. What we want to do is we want to reduce a product's resource use and emissions to the environment, as well as to improve socioeconomic performance throughout the entire life cycle. And that facilitates the economic, environmental, social dimensions throughout the entire value chain. So if we put it a little bit more graphical, we have LCA, which is a tool, a technique. We have LCM, that is a process, management process. And we have LCT, that is a concept. And that's, if you do sustainability, there are two concepts that you cannot forget. One is LCT, and the other one is systems thinking. But systems thinking, we talk about it tomorrow. Okay. That brings us to eco-efficiency. Because I've been talking about efficiency, what the heck is efficiency? Okay. And eco-efficiency is a concept that was started by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's another organization, by the way. It's an association of different companies, big companies, cement companies, oil companies, etc., based in Geneva. They used to have a very nice office, by the way. I don't know if they're still there. And they want to help companies become more sustainable. Okay, and eco-efficiency is a contraction between ecological and economic efficiency. So in reality, what you're looking for is that combination of environmental and economic dimensions. It is a ratio of some economic value added to some measure of environmental impact. And you might think, well, some and some, what do you mean by some and some? Well, that's what you need to start defining, okay? And you do that in order to bring business excellence. Remember, that was designed by the World Business Council in order for companies to link their environmental performance and their economic performance. And you have a simple formula. Eco-efficiency is product or service value divided by an environmental influence. Simple. That gives you numbers as a manager, and you can say, my eco-efficiency of this product or this service is better than that one. So it's very simple. So you can compare it more or less to LCM, not so much to LCA, but the same approach to LCM. And it is very widely used by companies as a link to sustainability. And then you're wondering, yeah, but what do I put there? What do I put there, right? Well, you have a lot of different factors, and it's coming shortly, okay? So hold that question for 2 slides. You want to do that to reduce the material intensity of goods and services, energy intensity, reduce toxic dispersion, enhance material recyclability, maximize sustainable use of renewable resources, increase material durability, increase service intensity of goods and services, and it's based on 1, dematerialization. So get rid of the things you don't need. That's called minimalism, right, in architecture, something like that. Okay. Product loop closure. So circular economy, before circular economy became the big hype. So you start closing those loops by trying to go to zero waste factories where every output is returned to the natural systems as a nutrient. And we have it as a service extension. So we also have a functional extension. You remember life cycle assessment? We had a functional definition, and it comes back here. And we have 4 areas. One of the areas is redesign of products, rethink markets, industrial neighbors by revalorizing your products, and re-engineering your processes. So, I told you to hold your question for 2 slides. Here it is. So, generally applicable value indicators. That means you can choose any of those ones for your formula. You can have quantity. So, how many cars am I selling? What is my total sales, net sales? What is my net profit? And that's your economic value. And you can do it as appropriate for a particular one. You can use it in US dollars, you can use it in yens, you can use it in crowns, etc., etc. Okay. And then you can also choose your environmental indicator. But remember, you have to choose one for the economic, one for the environmental. Okay. Then you can have energy consumption in gigajoules, or multiply if you are from the US or the UK. and you can get that from your procurement data. You have your material consumption, can be in metric tons, can be in kilograms, can be in milligrams, can be in whatever it is. And then you have your water consumption, you have ozone depleting substance emissions, you have your greenhouse emissions, and that's being driven by, for example, brand image, competitive advantage, cost reduction, customer relationships, employee relationships, blah, 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 blah. And those are the companies that have been using eco-efficiency and the drivers that they use for eco-efficiency. Yeah. So we have Dow Chemical, another big chemical company in the US, and they started using eco-efficiency to try to reduce their environmental impacts. And they wanted to identify opportunities for natural gas savings in the plant's steam system. Yeah. So you can do it by a trap program and enhance their ongoing leak repair campaign. It costs you it cost them $225,000, which it sounds a lot for a person, but for a big company like Dow, it's not that much. Man. It's like 1 day's profit or something, even less than that. And they saved an energy and cost savings, 272,000 million BTUs and 1.9 million. So now you have your economic indicators and your environmental indicators. Calculate eco-efficiency, please. Which one do you choose? Okay, so remember, you have to put the environmental, the economic value above, and then the environmental value. So you can do it from here, by your cost, and divide it by that, or you can do it from this, divided by that. And then you get your eco-efficiency number. The payback was in 6 weeks, by the way, in case you're interested. So you can do your eco-efficiency from savings. So you divide your savings by your environmental impact, and then you get that number there, 6.98 times 10 to the minus $6 BTU. Okay. Now it's payback for those you lawyers who make us non-lawyers suffer with legal issues. But you can also do it from costs. Okay, and the numbers are very different. Okay? But we're not looking at the number. What we're looking is how can we compare that to something else? And that's what's important on eco-efficiency. It's like with LCA that you can compare two products. Here you can compare two numbers. Is this process better than that process? Remember, you have to compare apples and apples. You cannot compare unless you're making a fruit salad. But that's another point. Okay? There are some problems with eco-efficiency. The problem is that relativity. So if I make my car, one car, more eco-efficient, let's say instead of consuming 10 liters per 100 kilometers, it now goes to 5. But instead of selling one car, now I'm selling 100 cars. Absolute emissions are much higher. And that's a problem of eco-efficiency or relativity or rebound effect, where you do something to improve something else, but then you sell more, and then the absolute number is bigger than what you started with. So that's a problem of eco-efficiency. Tends to not focus on the social dimension or sustainability, nor the time dimension. But it's still a very useful tool. It is very difficult to assess and improve some of the things just by quantifying some opportunities. So you have to have a bigger perspective. And it is affected by standard economic theory from capitalism that you have money and you have environmental impacts. In order to counteract that rebound effect, that relativity, somebody came out with a concept of eco-effectiveness. So instead of now just looking into one product and looking at just the emissions of that product, you look at the entire emissions of that product multiplied by the number of products that there's over there in the entire system. And you look at the absolute number, not just the relative number. The problem with this one is that people tend to think not in system thinking, but in linear thinking, and then it becomes complicated. Okay, but it is a way of trying to just think bigger. So what I'm asking you is to first life cycle thinking, and then systems thinking, as we're going to be discussing tomorrow. And as I said, it looks at the absolute positive impact of the entire system, of the product in the system. It addresses the entire system, and we'll see that tomorrow. And we want to see the system. And remember the elephant, because the elephant is coming back tomorrow. So it's now I'm playing with time. Okay. There is an elephant. So remember the elephant tomorrow. Back to the future. We have also some related concepts, for example, design for the environment. And again, not self-promotion, but I've carried out a lot of literature on a lot of tools. So if you want to look at them, there are about 16, 20 tools, something like that. Design for the environment, also called eco-design, that you look at the design stage of a product and then you try to make that much more efficient and much more recyclable. We have cleaner production, very closely related to eco-efficiency, very closely related, but cleaner production came out from UNEP and eco-efficiency came out from the World Business Council. Factor 4 coming from the Wuppertal Institute, and then factor 10 and factor 20. And what you want to do is you want to have your consumption, but double your impact, your productivity. We have factor 10 related to factor 4, and we have the factor 20 related to factor 4 that is even bigger and bigger. They say that a factor 4 increase is necessary in developed nations in order not to exceed the Earth's carrying capacity, and that a factor 10 increase is needed to allow for industrialization in developing nations. And we even need a greater efficiency to accumulate for population growth. And now we are more than 7 billion, almost 8 billion people in the world and counting. This is a graph. It's from Van Berkel. Now he works in UNIDO. And he shows you where we are. So for example, we have eco-efficiency that is up here. We have design for the environment that is rather limited. So that's a product type of thing. We have industrial ecology. We have pollution control, reuse, recovery, waste minimization. We have cleaner production here. That's a proposal by Van Berkel. Thank you. Questions? Yep, Mike. And I can see it in your faces. Pika is almost there, okay? It's at 10:30.
Yeah, thank you. I have one comment and one question. First for the comment, and you use the 3M as the case, as the example for the LCM, but probably it's not a appropriate case anymore. Just a little bit of updates for what CM has done. Probably our Belgian colleagues know it very well. Just recently, CM is involved in a pollution scandal concerning the soil contamination caused by a very dangerous chemical substance called PFOS. So probably that CM is not a good case anymore.
Well, you have to consider that we take cases according to what they do in the right moment for the right thing. So I'm not claiming 3M is a sustainable company. I'm claiming what they did in that particular case, it's good as an example of eco-efficiency. So I'm not saying they are great. I'm saying in that particular case, for this particular example, it's very useful because you have two economic indicators and you have one environmental indicator, and then you can calculate the eco-efficiency of those ones.
And for the question, so I'm not expert for economics and business management, but I'm always confused by two concepts. The first one is like you highlight here, that's the LCM, and you said that's a business management approach. And the other one, which is recently always talking about the fancier one, is called full value chain management or assessment. I don't know if you have any idea about the difference, or because people always use it as a replacement of fancier concept. So
my understanding is that one is more coming from business management and the other one is coming more from accountancy and type of things. So in one, you put more money on that accountancy type, and the other one, you just consider the entire life cycle stages of a product or service.
Thank you.
Was question.
I one of the questions, and the first one is, you just go back to the example. Just like there's a ecoefficiency, what is ecoefficiency measured with like economic costs? I'm bit lost in the environmental, how the environmental impact is measured in terms of, because it's clear the economic saving of doing this, but where the environmental.
No, it's not an economic saving. Okay, you look at the formula. The formula clearly states you put something economic in the numerator and something environmental in the denominator. As simple as that. What are the denominator and the numerator and the denominator? Whatever you want it to be. So whatever you want it to be, numerator, choose from one of these or any other thing. Denominator, choose from any of this or this or any other environmental issue. And that's it. That's it. As simple as that. And you end up with, if you look at this one, you have dollars here. Yeah, you have dollars here. Okay. And the other one you have BTUs. It's a measure of energy.
Okay, so there's that, the environmental.
Yeah.
And the two more is how can we see or the use of life cycle assessment and management into procurement? Is it put on the side of suppliers or is it inside qualifiers requesting having a side of management?
Why not both? Why not bring also the community? And that's some of the things that you might be talking about later today. Yeah. No, but you can always talk to Sigrid and Annette tomorrow. And you have to think of the entire life cycle of whatever is it that you are procuring. So it's not only from the buyer side, not only from the supplier side, but it is, what do you want to procure? A product? Which product? Lamps for a city? Okay, let's talk lamps for a city. Where did the lamps come from? What are they made of? How much energy was used to create that lamp? How much energy is going to be used to get rid of that lamp?
But who is the best capacity to undertake this? So we could qualify having information to this life cycle assessment.
That's a bigger question. So who is asking for that information and why is it asking for that information? Are they asking for that information? And that's why we have some parts of some of you who are doing life cycle management who need to start thinking about those things. And those are the type of questions that you should be talking to your case studies, saying, hey, you're procuring this, but have you considered the entire life stages of that product or that service? So it is up to you to be academics, but a little bit activist, not too much, just a little bit, okay?
No, it's just a comment because yesterday we were talking about this, and actually it's hard for a contracting authority to a public body to have enough tools of knowledge and training to require like to ask for all this information. I think that it should be the private companies, the private factors to quantify these things and maybe the law.
I think it should be both because
but it's hard, it's up on the private companies because they more before I buy.
it depends on the law. I mean, and I say I'm not a lawyer. I'm many other things, but a lawyer I'm not. And I still don't understand the EU law. We wrote a paper on sustainable public procurement some years ago, and you had 3 options on legal issues on EU. And then I was told by Marta, no, that's no longer valid. There's some new type of law. And I'm like, okay, forget about those things. Leave me alone. But you need to look into the law and say, okay, what is the law saying and what are the people doing? And there's a big difference between the law and the implementation of the law. And then Felipe can tell you about some of those things. And many of you know about, okay, do we buy things? Yeah, but who's buying? Is the person who's buying really aware of sustainability issues, life cycle management, or not at all? Or they just really trained to buy things on the cheaper side? So you buy the cheapest product. Yeah, Felipe is nodding. He's saying, yes. Who is the person who is there buying? Who is the person who is there selling? Because if you're a seller, you want to sell your products at the most profitable way, right? If you're a buyer, you want to buy them at the cheapest way. And then I can point you out to chemical leasing again, the book and the papers, and saying, yes, but that is a very linear way of doing things. I want to win. I want to win. Where's the collaboration? And then we're talking about collaboration tomorrow. Now, we can talk about it through a facilitator or no facilitator, and then we can both win without really both wanting to hyper win. And then we talk about capitalism too in that sense. But who trains the buyers? Who trains the sellers? How can we make sure that they are sustainability aware? Minimum, economic and environmental, minimum. We're not talking about social and the time dimension. We're talking about just the bare minimum. Who is educating them? Who is asking them these questions? You're asking me those questions. I'm not a sustainable procurement expert, but we need to bring those ones to the ground. And that's what we need, organizations like Electronics Watch and all the partner organizations who are going to help us transfer the theoretical knowledge that you're providing here to practice, and from practice to knowledge. Okay.
For example, I have about the consulting authority sustainable public buying or so I know that in the developing countries they use running such programs that they are specific, so they do a lot of workshops and trainings and so on and so forth. There's another initiative in including their education, academic education, degrees, environmental sustainability that would accredit them in the skills from their
Yeah, and there are people who are really driving this, let's call it movement, like Sigrid and Annette, who are coming tomorrow afternoon. They're coming at 12 o'clock, but they're presenting tomorrow afternoon. And you can ask them, they've been, I mean, they're really great ladies, really pushing, and they're working with Felipe and with us in many ways. They're really active, they're really proactive, really active and interactive. And you're like, yes, we need people like them. But then the people with them with which remit. So they have a particular remit within the region of Gävleborg. How can we transfer that from a particular region in Sweden to Italy, to Mexico, to Germany? Not only the law, but also the implementation of the law. Can you pass the?
This is a comment to who should be doing this, both sides should be doing it. And what we see in our work is both sides have no idea. And so it's a learning process. Somebody has to start, and then you say, somebody buyer asks for an LPA. Because somebody, mostly a young person coming from university, has an idea, let's do this, they have no idea, and the politician asks it to play. They have no idea, then they review something, and they are not happy with the public buyer. So next time with the next tender, they will frame the questions in a better way. There is no solution, and like, okay, this is happening now. It's a process, and it's a learning. And I do think that public rights can take the leading role. Not to be very kind, and we've already talked about it. It's there must be the expertise at the time and the leadership. Legally, they can do it because they can write anything into their tender, actually. Well, the big problem is here, not the legal limits. The big problem is rather the conceptual framework they work in. If you have been a procurement for the last 20 years and your focus was cost, how would you expect such a person to think about sustainability? It's actually from a labor perspective, you shouldn't think about it, they can do, unless you provide them with training and resources as an employer. If you just tell them to do sustainability, everybody would say, no, I have no time, I have no idea, I have no expertise. So this is really about capacitating what we see is the more young people come into these organizations, the more this is changing.
And you consider that this is one of the first ITNs on sustainable public procurement. It's 15 of you. So become champions, become multiplier effects. And I really urge you to do that in an academic way and in a practice way. So be in touch with the partner organizations, help them, but they have to help you. Remember, you have to write your thesis. So it's important to write your thesis, and have a contribution to academic knowledge. And of course, you can work with them and help them, but most important is get your PhD.
I just another question, since we talked about organization. Life cycle assessment and all of the other concepts mentioned, always on progress. What about non-progress? So it was just an organization. I was just wondering, is that accounted in this?
Well, on the syllabus that we send you, we ask you kindly to check chapters 2, 3, and 4. Okay, on the book. Chapter 2, Sustainable Development and Sustainability. Chapter 3, Organizations and their contribution to sustainability. Yeah. Chapter 4, Tools, Initiatives, and Approaches used for implementing sustainability, divided into operations and production, including circular economy, cleaner production, design for the environment, factor X, green chemistry, industrial ecology, life cycle assessment, life cycle management, and life cycle thinking. Management and strategy, including corporate sustainability, CSR, corporate social responsibility, corporate sustainability, sustainable, socially responsible investment, more sustainable business models, the natural step.
Does those methods actually account, for example, how are your resources in my organization? The people who are doing those programs, are those accounted for? Or
Usually not. So all of the tools, initiatives, and approaches do not take into consideration people. They do not take into consideration change management, but that's why we have chapter 5 in here. And that's why we have a number of different things that we have been working in my team here at the University of Yale called Sustainable Organizations on implementing things like governance. So we have a paper published last year on governance for sustainability in organizations. We have another paper on employee engagement or employee participation. I can't remember which one is called on that. We have been working on sustainable development competencies and pedagogical approaches in different universities. We also work with circular economy, with gender issues. So anything that has to do with organizations and in an organization and out, how they relate to other organizations, we're doing it here. We have a number of papers. I think we have more than maybe 90, 100 papers on different types of organizations. Okay, so I need a coffee. If anybody has a question, ask for me in the coffee place. So thank you very much. Let's go for coffee and we'll be back here sharp at 11. Okay, I'm starting at 11. Rodrigo's time.